pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. We will get started as usual by reviewing and signing payroll and accounts payable. Looks like our payroll for the last time period was $30,193.41. Accounts payable $38,731.23. We did have 13 and a half hours of police department overtime, 2 hours of fire, and no highway. We have the chief here. Chief, any particular reason for a little bit of PD overtime?
How many hours did you have?
13.5?
13. We did have a call out for K9 research, so that was a minimum of the 4 hours for the call out.
Gotcha.
So that might have contributed to
Okay.
a little bit.
Okay, so K9 call out. We did not have any ACH payments, so I will send this around for board signatures. Everybody signed the rec manifest? All set?
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks, Joyce.
Good
Night.
I will take a motion to approve our consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm an aye, so that's a pass. Included in tonight's consent agenda are public minutes from 9/19, non-public minutes from 9/19 which are sealed, the rec manifest, treasurer's report, and building permits. We will now open up public comment. We have one audience member. Janice, I don't know if you have anything? So seeing no public comment, we will open and close public comment at the same moment. And we will move on to discussion action items. The only official action item on our list tonight is John Ventura talking to us about encumbering some funds. Come on up.
Folks.
Okay, so, as I've spoken with I think all of you now separately about this, and I actually just got the most recent budget numbers from Karen year to date. So year to date, in terms of a budgetary bottom line budget process, we're gonna be, right now, we're at about between 90 and 100,000 to the black, okay? I can tell you that some of that is made up of fuel savings, about 20, let's see, about 20,000 of that is made up of overtime, and that's really attributable to what you guys have given me to work with. You know, because I've had a full staff, and you guys have approved everything I've asked for them, and people want to stay here and work, and when you have full staff, you don't have as much overtime, so that's attributable to that, so thank you for that. Some of the other savings I've had is in uniforms. I think we've finally balanced it out so that I have officers that are all wearing the same shirts. They're not purple in color, they're faded, they're actually blue and have nice patches, so we're not in as much of a need at the moment of replenishing a lot of uniform things. And the uniform can take on a life of its own in terms of the PD budget, as Andy knows. We got savings there. And then the other part of the savings is in the overall salary line. If you remember last year when the budget was cut, or let me go back to when we talked about Bob Gagnon coming on board. We talked about part of that process, and the reason that you were approving that to move forward as a warrant is because we had a military serviceman out for the year, that's Kevin. So when the budget was cut at town meeting last year, the town administrator had come to all of our departments and asked us to trim and cut and, you know, and so that we could preserve the integrity of the merit increases that everybody got. So we took $40,000 out of the police budget knowing that Kevin wasn't gonna come back. That will obviously have to go back in my '24 budget because Kevin will be back in December. So that's some of that savings. So at any rate, so we do have a significant savings moving into the year. Another part of that is, you know, we do have a great part-timer now in Neil that you folks all approved over the summertime. He's a great addition. He's a working part-timer. He does give me at least a shift a week. That frees up some full-time hours also. So given that, what I'd like to do is, as you all know, you can't truly encumber salary funds for the next year unless there's a contract for those funds by way of an employment contract. So what I'm coming to you folks tonight with is the idea that, and again, I will say that since day one, I've told all of you in the town as a whole that I want to grow the size of the department by at least 5, and that would bring me up to 12, and we're at 9 now. Again, thankful to all of your help in approving the process thus far. It's not normal for a board to approve 2 full-time positions in a chief's first year as tenure. So thank you for that, I do appreciate it. But I also think that's part of what you guys recognize the needs of the town are, right? It's never really been an issue with our police department because our police department's been kind of piecemeal together, pardon the expression, for a little bit now. So it never was an issue that we needed addressing. So given that backdrop, I want to add a 10th officer now. If I am able, and I want to add a 10th full-time certified officer. I wouldn't ask you for this position if I did not have the intent on hiring a certified officer. I do have a couple of officers that have shown great interest in the department. They're friends of current officers that work here. And I think both of them have between 3 and 4 years experience. So they're young go-getters and they want to improve their situation. And your officers here are selling this place very hard because they're very happy. It's not hard to sell something when you're happy, right? When you believe in the product, which our guys believe in the town of Brentwood. After the budget process last year, they saw you folks all stand up and say you're getting your raises no matter what. That went a great deal to them. They will not forget that. So with that, I'd like to get somebody hired before 1/1, get them to a 1-year contract so that we can use the funds from this year that have already been approved by the voters for next year. So now what does that look like? Is it a 1-to-1 wash? I won't know until I get my final budget for the year, but it's going to be pretty close. Average officer at the 2 to 4 year range is going to cost the town an average of about $80,000. That includes salary, New Hampshire retirement, and health. Healthcare package. So given that, I'd like to do that. Now, what does that look like to the voters in terms of what their bottom line looks like on a budget? As a status quo right now, if we did nothing tonight, the voters would see an increase next year of the roughly $80,000 for Bob McCon. That was the warrant that we did in March. The voters already approved that position because they voted on it, so they know it's coming. They know that my budget will go up at a minimum of $80,000 for a full-time employee. Will they see any increase in '24 for this position? Generally, no. They would see it in '25 because and that's if we encumber the funds. If I hire this person before 1/1, they won't likely see much of an impact. It might sway 10 to 20, somewhere in that. If we come out at 100 in the black, they won't see it at all. But they're going to see it in '25. Okay, it has to be in the budget at some point. Now, regardless, and I think I've told all of you, I'm really not interested in bringing this forward as a warrant in March. We had a lot of articles last year, a lot of contested articles, and we saw how that went with a few articles. And I don't want to gum up the works, so to speak, with other articles that have a lot of merit in terms of infrastructure and buildings and things like that, and necessary capital reserve funds, when we can do it in a simpler form here like this. And I really don't think that this is a sleight of hand or hiding anything from the voters at all. If I had come to you tonight and the first time tonight is when you heard I wanted to make this place 12 officers, I would say, yeah, you probably should go in front of the voters, but I've made no secret about it. And I've not heard one negative comment about adding personnel to this department from any member of the public at all, not one. Even some of those folks who have been big naysayers of any penny spent out of this room have even said to me, I'll vote for a person before I vote for a building, all day long. Because I think the residents realize the need for personnel. They've seen the benefit of better services coming out of the police department, and they like that. I've had, we get great feedback downstairs. Just look at the door downstairs where we put all the things, and I forward a lot of them to town administrator, so the police are well liked. Now, do I think if I put it on a warrant, it would get approved? I can be bold and probably say yes, but I'd rather not squander the opportunity we have now. I know that one of the candidates that's interested in coming here got an offer from a neighboring department a few months ago, and he said, no, I'm not ready for that department. I kind of want to see what happens with Brentwood. Because I told my guys, I said, I'm not even going to talk to the selectmen until October-ish about a new position, and if our budget can handle it, so that's why I'm here. So I'm asking for the approval to start the process of hiring a 10th officer. I try to put them on right around 12/1, somewhere in December-ish, maybe even mid-month, but so that we can get them under a one-year contract and encumber the already approved funds and get that going.
Would this have the effect of reducing your overtime?
I believe it will. Yeah, that's the other thing, a good point, I'm glad you mentioned that. Essentially what I'm gonna come to you, outside of salaries, is a level funded budget. I have to put in $3,000 for the K-9 budget, because we put in $1 last year to preserve the line. And I had not been here for a K-9 program, so I didn't know what this town would spend on the K-9 program. I had a $2,500 budget in Wakefield, it's gonna be $3,000 here. Other than that, I don't see anything more or less than a level funded budget, other than maybe 1,000 here or 500 there. It's just, I don't need it right now. I don't need equipment, I don't need anything, I need people. That's really my greatest need. And you guys have always been great about what our needs are and supporting them, so that's what I'm looking for tonight.
Chief, can you remind us sort of where the gold standard rubric comes from in terms of how many patrol officers a town like Brentwood should have, like
Sure.
where you're getting that 12 number from?
Yeah, well, part of that is from personal experience in what would suit the population in my experience, but part of it is the old FBI numbers that they developed years ago of at least 2 officers on patrol per 1,000. And where we're right near the 5,000 mark, if you take the lieutenant and myself out, who don't normally patrol, that leaves you 10 people for the road and to answer calls. So that's where that comes from.
Gotcha.
Now, in my experience, the 12, because again, Wakefield was 5,300 people, almost identical to here. Completely different economical structure up there than down here. But 12 worked perfect for the calls for service that they had, which is very similar to here, amount of arrests and general population.
Thanks, I thought it had been sort of an official, like nationwide.
Yeah, the FBI puts that up, yeah.
Yeah.
Other
So
questions?
essentially, the way to think about this is we had a good year this year, we have extra funds. Using those funds now would let you hire somebody about 4 to 6 months earlier and would have 0 impact on tax rate for the next year.
I'd like to say 0, if
Or
it was
close,
today,
minimal,
it would be 0.
Yep,
But if a cruiser blows an engine,
right,
I'm gonna have to replace the
Sure.
engine to the tune of about $10,000, so, but essentially, yes. That's
Theoretically,
really where we would say.
gets you an extra officer now with as minimal as possible impact on the voters for
24,
next year.
Correct.
With the understanding that they'll then feel it the following year.
Yep.
In the budget.
So essentially, they're gonna feel the impact of the warrant-approved officer from March
Right,
in '24, and then an additional officer in '25.
Yep.
And then, my goal at the moment is to get the building on the ballot for 25. And then if I'm able to do that, I don't think I could conceivably ask for 11 and 12 until at least 26 or 27, which would put me in line with my goal of having us up to 12 within my first 5 years. That'd put us directly where that needs to be.
Questions, good, good.
Yeah, and this is not a question for you, Chief, but for those who have experienced, I mean, is there historical precedent to encumbering in this manner versus, doing this additional officer by warrant? Because I was only aware that it was done by warrant, so, I think, let me just say, that I agree with everything you're saying. I'm just,
Sure.
Trying to reconcile in my head whether, the process of us making this decision versus the voters making the decision is the more appropriate process. And I just don't know what the historical precedent is for that. I don't know if you could comment, Karen, or if anyone, or if Art, if you know, Andy, or...
I mean, I can tell you what I've seen in my practice. I've seen it done both ways. We added two positions in Wakefield without warrant. When we
We
came.
just added to it, but the select board just voted. to
Select
add
board
it to
just
the budget.
voted to add 2 positions
Right.
over the course of 2 years. There was a 2-year plan. Part of that one was I took away a part-time position, but nonetheless. But then last year, we added one in Brentwood by way of warrant.
Right. But
And-
that's
And
all
I think the timing of last year's request, I was speaking to Andy, the timing of last year's request, I understood the push to put it as a warrant. You folks had a lot more going on your plates with residents with other issues, and I think it was just the pulse of the board. Let's let the voters decide right now, because we've got so many other things on the plateau that we're dealing with. I don't see all of those issues still present for this board, so that, you have a little breathing room.
I think further to that, the people of the town elect this board to run the administration of the town. And so I think that it is pretty haphazard to be looking, going to the voters every time we want to hire someone to serve the town. It just doesn't really, I get it if you have a town of 500 people, but like, as we're growing, we kind of need to have the professionalization and capability to do what needs to be done to run the town. And as the officially elected representatives of the people, like, that's in our purview. So I just see it as we move toward professionalization of the town, I think that needs to be the default mode, unless there's something extraordinary. When there's an extraordinary position being sought, yes, then we should be going to the voters. But when there's a basic function of administration, safety, administration or safety for the town, that's our job. Like,
Yeah.
we're
I think
expected to go
I think
get
you're
it
actually
done.
both exactly right, that I completely agree with you, but I also think last year was an anomaly of a year, given we had a 9% inflation rate.
Sure.
So,
I think
so
that's
the
right.
reason it was a warrant last year was basically like, hey, town, we all know we need this, but can you stomach doing it now? Versus, do you wanna put it off? And the town overwhelmingly voted to do it last,
Right.
this year.
Sure. And if you
So
look
I
at
think it
what,
was smart to have it as a warrant last year, but I agree with you that if we have these funds, this is a slightly different situation than we found ourselves in 12 months ago.
yep, and
So,
To answer your question, Paul?
is there
Yes.
historical precedent? Okay, thank you.
Let's ask
So,
it. You know,
Yes, we have done it both ways. We have hired as a board and.
A
like you
new,
saw,
a new position,
A new position.
okay.
The town I work for full-time, the last 2 people the selectmen have hired outside of the warrant, they've just added it to the budget. So
Have we done that in Brentwood, do you know?
we've done multiple that way.
we've done that just since I've been on the board. We've
You did
hired an
one last
officer.
you
Yeah,
did, because
outside of
you
warrant.
did one 2 weeks after I was here, you
Yep.
approved.
We sure did.
As a new position?
Yeah.
I
New
mean,
position, yeah.
because we knew we had an officer going out on leave, and we hired an additional officer and added them to the budget.
Yeah,
To
I think
cover.
that was Saltzman that came on board for that position.
Yep. But that was before the economy sort of went a different direction.
Yeah, it was early
Yeah.
enough in the year so that, and then everything blew up.
Yeah.
But to fully answer your question, I've never seen encumbered funds to fund the position.
Maybe because they didn't have the availability to encumber.
Right.
I didn't encumber it.
Oh, no, you're saying
I don't think you did.
I didn't
We had
encumber
very few
anything
encumbrances
last year, and I had the funds to do so, I could have encumbered it. And again, last year, I think, well, I might have had some, but last year we had, we had funds from salaries to encumber, but we didn't have the position to be able to get one in under contract. This is a unique thing, and quite frankly, I had never heard of encumbering salaries until Karen told me, I'm like, we can do that? Because I didn't know you could. I know you can encumber all kinds of other stuff, but apparently if it's under contract the year prior for the next coming year, you can encumber.
That makes sense. I mean, it's the same as anything. It's like when the school encumbered funds to pave the parking lot. They'd already had, it's
Sure.
the same thing. They had it planned out, so they encumbered it, like.
Well, it's all a question of what the auditors will approve, right?
Well,
I did check with
I mean,
council.
is there authorization?
I did check with council to make sure it was allowable, yes.
Perfect. Russ, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
No, I mean, I think, everything that's been said, it makes sense to me, and Chief, thanks for, the explanation here, as well as, the one-on-one conversation. I'm supportive, I think to John's point, too, I think sometimes there's a fine line with the warrant article thing, where I think sometimes elected officials see it as a way to get out of making tough decisions. So I think to the extent we use them efficiently and bring those up sparingly is probably a good thing. But I have had multiple conversations like we all have with the chief, and I'm just supportive of the plan overall, and so I don't really have an issue with the course here.
Does anybody recall, I was just gonna look it up, but I can't find it quickly on my phone, what the town vote was on the warrant this year?
I was thinking about that on the
Was
way
it
over
ballot
here,
vote?
Yeah,
and I wanna say,
I mean, I know it was overwhelming
it was
majority.
unanimous save for maybe 3 people. And I think those 3 people voted no on everything else too.
Well, I mean,
But,
because I
and
think
that's fine, but it
I
was
think that's
overwhelming.
telling in terms of, that makes me, as the chair, feel more comfortable that we
Sure.
don't necessarily need to put this in front of the voters, because the voters have expressed time and time again support for our police department.
Yep.
And as you have just said, I saw you get up at the last town meeting and very clearly say that this is your plan, and I've heard you say it multiple times in public.
Mhm, yeah.
And I have never heard any concerns about it. So as somebody who was elected to represent the voters, I've not heard the voters try to steer this board in any direction away from what you have established as your plan. So for me to be able to represent the voters, I feel comfortable that the voters are in support
Sure.
of growing our police department.
And they have, and I thank you folks for supporting a lot, but you thank them too, because they have shown overwhelming support for this PD.
Yeah.
I mean, just by, the people that come by, and just to say thanks, or, on special days, whatever Facebook day there is that day, they bring us goodies, whatever, I don't know, law enforcement day, puppy day, whatever. But they come out in droves and support us. They love seeing our guys at the school in the mornings, and so it's good.
Just to highlight something for a second, in a climate where people are begging and groveling for employees, I just think we should show that people are lining at the door to come work for the chief.
Yeah.
of the issues we've had with the police department
Yeah,
over the last,
you've had a couple.
over the last years, but I mean, it just goes to show what type of department the chief's running and.
And the guys down there.
And,
Well said.
and I think he actually said he wanted to be a gold standard department when he got here, and I
Really?
think within his short tenure, we've created that.
Yeah, I
He's
don't,
created that.
I wanna be, excuse the expression, Jen, but I wanna be the Joneses. I don't keep up with them, I wanna be the
Sounds
Joneses.
good to me, okay, I'm in favor.
It was like one of the only votes that wasn't a ballot vote.
Oh,
Yeah,
it was just a
It was just
voice
a
vote.
regular voice vote.
But I think you're
It
right,
was
I think it
overwhelming, it
was
was. It was so overwhelming that the person that put it on there to be a secret ballot vote
Took it off,
saw
right?
the support in the crowd and took it off.
Right, right.
So that should tell you something. right?
Yeah, it does tell me.
Anyway, that's my pitch, folks, so, thank you for your time on that.
Now, if there were to be a motion made by one of my board members, it would have to be to encumber whatever funds you had left, or would it be a certain dollar amount? How would we,
It would have to be the approval of the addition of a 10th position, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, if I overstep. I don't know that you can put a dollar value on it, I think you would just put that
oh,
That
that's
the
true,
town
we
will
would do the
encumber-
encumbrance separately,
the
right?
town will encumber the
Right.
maximum funds allowable at the
At the
close of
time,
the year to pay
yeah.
for the position,
That makes
I think, is that right?
Sounds good to me.
That makes
Yeah.
sense, yeah, you don't have to
I
specify.
think DRA is the one that has wording
Yeah.
issues, so
Right.
we'd have to, but I think we should hold off to answer the legal and DRA questions before we feel the motion on that,
On the encumbrance part, or on the approving an additional position?
on the encumbrance.
Yes, okay, which I think is
thought we
really
Didn't
simple.
you already get that?
Did we not?
I spoke to council, not DRA, but I spoke to council.
And council was good with it?
Are you good with it?
I'm good with that.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
So, I'm sorry, before,
Go ahead.
can you explain to me what that means in terms of, you know, I think what you said, the maximum amount available at the end of the year, what?
So whatever the chief's budget has for overage at the end of the year will be encumbered into the 2024 tax season instead of returned to the voters. So instead of buying down the tax rate in 2024, it'll be used not to increase his budget for the addition of the officer.
Right, it almost sounded as though you might even have more than
I
what's
might.
needed.
If it were today, I would have more.
Right.
But I also have 3 months left in the year, and I don't know, you know, cruisers are cruisers, they break, stuff breaks. So I don't wanna just go out and say, you know, we'll have, but as it looks today, you know, like I said, today's numbers are $100,000 in the black. And I've already paid some major bills this year. IMC, one of them
You've got
just
it.
came in, so, you know, we don't have
So
any,
October,
big
November,
ones.
December left.
yeah, we don't have any big ones, but I don't wanna jeopardize it either.
Right.
So,
So maybe the wording of the motion should say encumbering, you know, up to the full cost of a
Sure.
full-time officer.
yeah, that's what I was,
Along those lines.
that's what I was thinking. I don't know if a friendly amendment would be
Are you
reasonable.
comfortable with that wording?
Good.
Okay. I think we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
First and second vote.
And I'm an aye, so that's a pass for you to open up your 10th
I gotta be
position.
honest with you, you guys are great. Thank you. That's
Twice.
huge. That goes a long way with the guys. They know what you guys all do up here for them, believe
Well,
me.
we're really happy. I mean, we're happy that they're happy.
We love it, actually.
That's good.
Is that all you got from me? Or do you have
I
anything
think. Do you have anything else for the chief?
No.
Okay, thank you.
else? Thanks, folks, appreciate
See
it.
ya.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. Moving on to regular business, we'll turn to Karen first for whatever she has for us on deck.
We received a letter from Clear Victory 2 weeks ago from Trubiano in reference to the rezoning of a lot on Route 125. Council has reviewed that letter and they are drafting a response stating that the language in the warrant article is irrelevant, that the intent is clear that that specific lot should be rezoned commercial based off of the listing and the information that was supplied at the voting. So they're going to draft a response directly back to them.
Does everyone understand the situation? Okay, so just for anybody watching, to explain, the warrant article last year that was passed to basically some lots that were sort of multi-use, right, commercial and residential, it basically allowed those to be all residential or all commercial. And there's a person in town who is challenging one of those and suggesting that a lot should have gone residential instead of commercial.
Or
And-
group of persons, actually.
A group of persons, correct.
Yeah.
And so council is saying that the only way to change that would be another warrant article, correct?
Correct, and a vote at the 24 town meeting.
Okay,
And I think just to give further,
yeah,
you know, when the planning board passed that, the intent was to extend those multi-use lines to be commercial all the way, you know, out. And at least that's how I had explained it and understood it to be. So, you know, and I was one of the members, you know, at the time, so
so potentially there was a little misunderstanding about what that was gonna look like, maybe.
at least, you know, according to this attorney,
Retroactively,
but
Yeah.
I don't really understand it, to be honest with you.
Okay,
I don't understand their attorney's, you know, viewpoint.
Okay.
That was never really the intent of the planning board.
okay.
Which, this also has to do with tree cutting, you know, and that
That's
they're
the bylaw.
dissatisfied with that, but sort of impertinent because the tree cutting could occur whether he was commercial or residential, as I
Correct.
understand it. So-
Correct, and he did file for the appropriate intent to cut, so all
Right.
of his permits were
Right.
approved.
And that can happen on residential or
Mhm.
commercial, yep,
And there's no
To your
buffer
point.
that's required for a residential lot, you can cut up to the property line.
gotcha. So there's nothing that this board needs to do at this point?
Correct.
Will there be any actionable step in the future that this board will need to do?
I don't believe so. If they are to address and would like to request it to be rezoned, that would go before the planning board during
Gotcha,
their zoning process,
Okay.
which will start in November.
okay,
House Bill 321 was voted and passed this year. It goes into effect on October 3rd. That statute is saying that they're requiring that non-public minutes be reviewed. So as soon as the purpose for them to be sealed no longer exists, they are to be unsealed, and they should not remain sealed for more than 10 years. So you can either have there's two ways that you can deal with your non-public minutes. You can either have it time-based and say everything that you'll review them, you know, once annually and unseal everything that purpose no longer exists, that is more than 10 years old, or you can adopt a specific procedure. If you wanted to adopt a specific procedure, council would just they would recommend something along the lines of, if they relate to the sale of an acquisition of a property, they can be released after the transaction closes or falls through. Minutes which may adversely affect someone's reputation can be released after that person passes away, and minutes regarding the termination of an employee shall remain sealed indefinitely. I'd also further add that minutes affecting litigation could be unsealed after the final decision has been made and the appeal period has lapsed.
and how does this relate to historical sealed minutes 30, 40, 100 years ago?
Minutes have not been unsealed, ever.
Right,
So this is a push to get those to be unsealed. So likely the purpose for of many of those minutes to be sealed no longer exists.
right,
We can't have a blanket motion that reseals all of them, so we would need to adopt either one of these methods, whether it's time-based or an actual procedure. And then if I were to receive a request for a specific set of non-public minutes, I would review them before releasing them. If that reason no longer exists, then I'd have to bring it, if I wanted it to be sealed again, I'd have to bring it back to you, request them to be sealed.
Well, I'd have to study this because I was reading it for the first time, but it also seemed to suggest that if we didn't do anything and didn't have like a procedure, then the default would be that it would be
Time-based.
released in a 10-year time frame.
Yeah.
So-
meaning that if we were to do nothing, every sealed minutes 10 years and older would immediately be available to anyone who came in and requested them. Okay, if we adopted the 10-year, what you're saying is they would stay sealed until somebody requested them, and then the requested documents would come before us?
I would review them, if there was a request made and I reviewed that set of minutes and said, hey, there's nothing in here, you just let them go, then I would request that you would vote to unseal them and send them out. I mean, there's no reason to keep them sealed.
Right.
Well, I think if you went time frame, they were automatically unsealed after October 3rd.
This is what I'm trying to understand. What about minutes from, 15 years ago? What happens to them?
Those would technically be considered unsealed.
Unless we had procedures in place that would protect them.
So I think in this instance where we've never unsealed, I think we've unsealed one set of minutes ever since in all of history, and that was because that specific set was requested, and so we
Yep.
reviewed them with council and then we released them. I think it would be more advantageous for the board to say, under these circumstances, they should remain sealed. Right, if they deal with an employee matter, if they deal with a termination, if they deal with litigation or the sale of a property, those should stay sealed for that purpose.
Okay, and if we pass the rules, the 10-year thing does not apply?
Right, it's either or.
Then that means even minutes from a few months ago that
Right.
were sealed would be unsealed.
If they didn't fall into these criteria, but they do, I mean, the reasons that we've gone into non-public generally are for
Right.
reputation or for legal. And those legal cases are still ongoing,
And who
so those would remain
would
sealed.
judge whether it's a reputational issue?
That would come before this board, and then you would have to do it in a non-public session to vote to unseal them. So before anything that was sealed is unsealed, it would be a board decision.
Are you asking us to do anything now? Because I don't know
I'm
that
asking
I'm
you to pick
equipped
one.
at this point. I'm sorry?
Do we have to do it tonight, I think is the
I
question.
mean, you kind of do,
Probably,
because
yeah.
10/3 is the date, so if
Which
you
is our
wanna
next
think
meeting.
about it today, that's fine, but next Tuesday you need to be able to pull a trigger on one of these decisions.
Well, I'm just trying to understand. I feel like I understand the rules-based. The 10-year based, I feel like I'm struggling a little bit to understand. So that means, explain that to me again in terms of like, what if somebody comes in and requests something older than 10 years? They automatically get it.
They could automatically get it, right, because it would be considered unsealed.
Okay.
Before I actually release anything to the public though, I would review it and bring it to the board and say, hey, these have been requested, this is unsealed. And the reason to seal it or not seal it exists or doesn't, and then I would let you decide. Right, because I'd still have the time.
I don't think we would have that option.
I'm not sure you can do that under the yeah, that's what I'm trying
10
to
years is
figure out.
10 years, it's now,
I'm not sure you could, I
it's
think
now a
you would
public
have to
document.
release it, right?
There's got to be
You'd have to do it within the
something,
5 days.
which would still fall within a meeting time generally.
But I don't think legally we could prevent it from being released without,
I think Andy's right.
without,
I guess that's how
Well,
I would practice it.
it says if you don't have procedures, then you need to review and vote. This review shall occur no more than 10 years.
so we
Without
would have to
further
review
action.
every non-public minute before October 3rd.
This is retroactive.
That's what I'm trying to understand, is it go back 100 years?
And are these notes, like notes you took, Karen, or is?
The first two are, those are the statute, so
Okay.
HB 321A and B, those are the statute. Time base is the practice that Franklin is going to, that's what their council is recommending. And then I checked in with our town council for language if we wanted to adopt a procedure. Because I feel like the procedure gives you a little bit more latitude.
So is that your recommendation?
The procedure.
I think
That's
the
hers.
procedure is,
Yeah.
because otherwise you're just releasing everything
Yeah.
from.
And can we change, let's say we adopt a procedure tonight.
Mhm.
Do we have, of course, we can change that next weekend, next week, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
At our next meeting, so.
And you can get really fantastic and read all of the non-public minutes for the last 60 years and then be like, hey,
Yeah, that's
maybe we
Look
want
at all
to change the
that's-
rule.
not something I'm interested in.
Well, it does say here that what we would do is adopting procedures to review minutes of meetings held in non-public. So the question is, what what triggers that review? Is it just a request from the public, or do we have to do that?
I think we should put
For
that as part of our
everything.
procedure.
Well, I think you would have a procedure for certain purposes while it would remain sealed. And then I think your review process would be done more regularly, whether that was once a year or quarterly, you review a few sets of minutes and vote to unseal them as you go.
But to trigger the procedure, we could have it be a request.
Mhm.
Janice has something.
Can I just ask, are you gonna be advising other boards in town to this?
Well, this board will have to make a decision which way they want to go, and then I'll be sending that out to the rest of the boards to say. I
It
mean,
would apply to all.
Like, we
town boards.
won't meet again until October 16th.
but I think the same process should be done unilaterally across town,
Right,
regardless.
no, I agree,
So with like the library having their own board,
right,
they would have to have the same discussion presumably, correct?
right, and we don't meet again, so how do we get around, do we have to have a special meeting to do this?
I agree with you, Andrew. I'm sorry, I've missed that, but I think your reading of it is correct, the way
The last
it's a little
sentence is actually-
awkwardly written, you know, but I've read it now a few times, and I think you're right. It does say, you know, that after 10 years, it would need to be disclosed.
If they want to review.
Unless there's a procedure.
Right.
Right, if not reviewed.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, is what's the obligation to review?
So
and to
you would have to
review Retroactively.
review the minutes and vote to keep them sealed, which would keep them sealed for another 10 years.
So
Sounds onerous.
it says if you do not adopt a policy, the board has to review each set of minutes and decide whether they can be released. And that review has to occur within 10 years of sealing the minutes or deciding to keep them sealed. I do recommend that you do this. Every year I look at the minutes from more than 5 years ago and see if they should remain sealed. Non-public minutes created prior to the adoption of the amendment automatically become public in 10 years, 2033. So within the next 10 years, they all need to be reviewed to determine whether or not to disclose them.
So it sounds like it's not retroactive.
Correct.
That's what that
So
sounds
that's
like.
fantastic.
It's
Correct.
not retroactive?
That was
Okay,
my,
so it
that's the
says
big hankering. that I had.
Non-public minutes created prior to the
That's not
adoption
correct.
automatically become
We'll go with it. Thank you. I appreciate
Wait a
it.
minute.
public in 10 years, 2033.
So,
So it's only starting now.
the 10-year clock starts now, so in 10 years from now, everything from 2033 to the inception of record keeping would be available for disclosure,
No, I don't
unless they were reviewed,
It's not
but
clear.
it's still usually 10 years.
That's not clear.
Quick question. So council's weighed in, but what about, like,
NHMA.
Thank you.
Got your back.
Finishing each other's sentences now. Nice job. What about NHMA giving us some kind of,
They haven't chimed in on this, and on the listserv, it hasn't given, the towns are not overwhelmingly going one way or the other.
just feels like,
And
I think
NHMA
this
just
is
put this out
retroactive.
like the
I
other
don't think
day.
it is.
Non-public minutes created prior to the adoption of the amendment automatically become public
In 10 years.
in 10 years. So within the next year, 10 to 10 years, they all need to be reviewed.
Yes.
That seems to me all, like from 1780 something.
Well,
Right.
we could unseal
The
those
right
guys.
to-
Yeah, anything before
The right to know,
1900, done.
it came into
Did that
into
exist?
existence August 26, 1967,
What did?
the right to know law. So that's when boards first began being permitted to go into non-public session.
Okay,
Oh.
okay,
So
so
no.
1967.
Yeah,
Okay, so that makes it a little better, we're not talking 1700s here. So I'm a little confused because they say here, I agree that trying to adopt a broad policy is going to be difficult to do and even more difficult to administer.
Yes.
So this sounds like Laura is saying to us that a policy is not the way to go. But then she says, if you don't adopt a policy, the board has to review each set of minutes and decide whether they can be released, and that review has to occur within 10 years. I do recommend you do this.
Well, I think we'd have to do that regardless.
Either way, you need a
Either way,
policy, whether your policy is to review minutes every 5 years or every 10 years or whatever.
We don't
I mean,
Either
the-
way, they have,
The purpose is to increase transparency, and so if
Right.
the reason no longer exists, then
Sounds
they
like a
should
future
be
select
unsealed.
problem.
Every year I look at the minutes from more than 5 years ago and see if they should remain sealed. But does that mean back to 1967?
That I can
Well-
clarify,
well, if you do it,
but if we started, I mean, you would just,
you would know the reasons, you would actually most likely have a database list, why this meeting was.
that just started last year.
But so anyways, getting back to the whole thing of looking at this a little more closely, it's not like we have to do something by October 3rd, right?
Correct.
I mean, because it's into the future, so we have time to figure this out,
We
right?
just have to decide whether we're adopting
way,
a
yeah.
policy, and if so, what our policy is.
Right, but if we didn't adopt the policy tonight, because we just need more information, it's not like we're prejudiced in some manner.
So
We're
I
not re-
will confirm whether or not that's retro or not retro.
Next Tuesday, we're not releasing 30 years of minutes.
Exactly, because it says
Typed in the vault.
you don't have to do that until 10 years, right? So, I mean, we have time. At least as I'm understanding it.
Okay,
I'm pretty confused by the whole thing, honestly.
so I will get more information and we will
Russ's
regroup next
face
week.
is looking like how I'm thinking. I'm a little confused by the whole thing.
Yeah, well, we definitely need the time and any other input is,
My understanding is this was a Brentwood rep, Yokola? Jill? That's my understanding. So this is local, this is homegrown, I believe.
no, it's not home.
Well.
Anyway,
represents us.
the, on a different note, before we finish this conversation, I'm slightly concerned that the conversation we just had could be misinterpreted or misunderstood by viewers. So I was just wondering if you would take a second to just explain why minutes of non-public are sealed. I know it was touched on early, but if you're not used to the jargon as a member of the community, you might think, well, why would you hide, quote unquote,
Right.
hide any information whatsoever? So
Right.
I don't know if you mind taking a second.
So minutes are sealed generally if we are discussing a personnel matter, whether that means someone's background, their criminal history regarding their employment, disciplinary matters, promotions, that can all be done in non-public session and sealed. If you were going through litigation against an opposing party and you wanted to discuss the terms of trial prep, discussions with counsel, or any settlement arrangements, those could all be done in non-public and sealed. If you were discussing a real estate transaction and you releasing this information publicly could give the other party an unfair advantage, then that could be done sealed until that transaction closed, and then that reason for it to be sealed no longer exists, and you could release those terms to the public. So those are the types of discussions that would,
And
Generally.
legally, we are not allowed to go into non-public unless we have one of those reasons and state it prior to going into
Correct.
correct.
And it's been in practice since
1967.
1967.
And for example, every year when we bring people in to discuss people that are behind on their taxes, that falls under reputational harm because of
Correct.
people who are having financial difficulties that might not be public knowledge to their friends and neighbors. Those go under reputational, so those all have to, and it's in the law, the 91A law, what is it, A through J or something, I forget how many it goes
Yes.
through. You have to meet one of those to be non-public, but some of them are more permanent, like personnel.
Mhm.
Some are more temporary, to your point, like
Real
real
estate.
estate, and maybe, and even legal.
Mhm.
Because once the legal cases are closed, those things no longer need to necessarily be private.
Thank you.
But I think it's important clarification, yeah, that this is not, there's some things about this, while this feels confusing and a little procedurally difficult, the basic idea behind transparency is a decent one, a good one. So, and I'm not opposed to it at all, we just have to figure out how to do it in a reasonable way. So what I'm understanding is, Paul, you and Karen, you agree that even though this law goes into effect on October 3rd, if it takes us a while to really understand and interface a little bit with council, and it takes us a couple weeks to make a policy, there is no harm done in that delay.
I believe so.
Okay. Because, yeah, I feel like I need to understand this a little bit better and research it a little bit better to understand what we need to do. Okay. So is everybody okay with tabling it for now and kind of thinking this over?
Yes.
Right. What else do you have for us
I was-
after that?
I was thinking a department head meeting next week to kick off budget season and then starting regular budget appointments the following week on the 10th.
The only downside to that is I will not be here next week, but Andy's gonna chair for me, so if that works better for everyone, I'm okay with that, because I can, catch up on it afterwards. And I've shared with a couple board members a couple thoughts I had about that.
How's the video been doing, by the way? Pretty smooth?
I think it's been good, right?
Yeah.
Whatever audio issues we were
Good.
having seem resolved.
Good,
We
cool.
don't really know why, but
It had to do with
streaming
Yeah, awesome.
rate or something.
I'll be dialing in.
So do you want to have a full department meeting with 3 in person, 3 board members in person?
I mean, I'm
That's
fine with proceeding, but that's up
I
to
think
the,
it's okay to proceed. I mean, will it set us, the timing works better if we have it next week, right?
I mean, if you do it next week because there's no elections this
Yep.
year, it gets you through all of your budgets by the end of November.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fine.
nice.
Trick or treat in Brentwood is on the 31st. So I didn't know if you wanted to have a board meeting, because we do have budget appointments that evening. Do you want to meet at 4 so that you folks can get home for trick or treat, or do you not care and you want to just keep it on at 6?
I'm fine with doing it as early as you wanna do it to support the trick-or-treating activities of all families, but I realize not flexibility isn't available to everyone, so.
Do we need to have a meeting that night, or can we do a sign and go?
Whatever you want. If you don't want to have a meeting, that's fine. I'll just adjust the budget schedule and extend it out a little bit.
Are we pretty confident that trick or treat will be happening on a Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm actually not traveling, so I would like to be here for trick or treating. I'd like it to be earlier.
So that you can go trick or
That was
treating.
not.
He would like to get the candy with his children.
He has his costume picked out already.
Are you guys gonna batch?
Yeah,
So if anything,
Dynamic duo.
if we don't have a meeting that week and just sign, it would just push us out 1 week on budgets, but you said we have plenty of time on that. So I would be okay. I mean, I have kids that are gonna be trick or treating, so I would be in favor of not meeting and trying to, rush home for trick or treating.
Okay.
I would be okay to cancel. Is anybody opposed to that?
So cancel the meeting.
Cancel.
Cancel meeting and just do sign.
Okay.
Okay, with everybody?
pro Halloween, sure.
Okay, Halloween, support the community. Okay.
Documents to sign. This is your MS1, which is a report of all of your property valuations in town. It is an increased net valuation of $14 million over last year.
Anything in particular that's noteworthy that we should be aware of?
Actually, most of the growth was commercial. It was commercial buildings.
Okay. So
That's a good
total,
thing.
Mhm.
so total valuation,
Need to run with-
$742,919,892. All right, I'll take a motion to sign the MS1.
Move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm an aye, and we each need to sign this.
And that reflects $3 million in exemptions based off of
Stay
the
on your
increase.
Oh, sorry, my J's kind of take up a little space, sorry about that.
3 million in
My leaky
exemptions,
J's.
3 million in
Have you
exemptions.
seen some other people's signatures on this board?
So anyway, based on, you said $3 million in exemptions based on,
The town meeting changes, so the increase from the elderly exemption. I need 11 signatures here. This is the last land use change tax bills and warrant for 3 ponds. So there's 10 more lots, and then that closes out phase 2.
So
Motion.
these are all the current lots that are left
Yeah.
right now, is what you're saying?
50,000.
And these are bringing them out of
Out of
current
current
use and putting them into buildable status?
Yep.
Okay, I heard a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I am an aye, so we have to sign each one of these separately?
Yes.
That'll take a little while.
And it says here black ink, so anyone who's not using black ink, switch out your pen.
It's the register.
Check.
Felonious purchase.
You were actually the pen hoarder. I found like 15 pens in your mailbox today.
They're probably all mine. I went looking for my good pens and they're all gone.
Oh, I think I put them in the jar.
It's like, oh yeah, I stole them. After accusing you of
I
hoarding.
put them on my desk.
She admits that she in fact stole them.
I'll submit the video to the chief later.
After he stole a wheelchair.
Criminal trespassing
You
in
hear about
town
that?
offices.
Oh, boy.
He gets a call from a suspicious man stealing a wheelchair.
It was the chief?
Heather grabs the plate numbers, he drives around the back of the building. Gagnon runs the plates, Heather comes back to a jump into her.
Uh-oh. Gotta keep our eye on that chief.
Save your money anywhere you can.
I thought that was so funny.
All right, so I think I got all of them.
You need an elderly exemption, that's kind of scary.
So that total elderly exemption ended up around 3 million?
Yes.
Like a hair under.
And then this is the signed amendment form for the handbook based off of the changes that you did on the appointments.
Yes. Was that, it was 3 million total, but wasn't the change like 1 million? Or was the change 3 million?
No, the total, I think the change was about 2 million between the two.
Oh, okay. Because we'd already had 7 on
Yes.
the books.
But you only had 8 and it went to 17.
Okay, so
And then-
9 more.
Plus the exemption
Townspeople
amount
signed up.
increase.
Yep.
That's just if you wanted to see the language.
Yep.
Change that's in paragraph.
So the ideology taken out.
Can we, like, set a date to discuss the hard time?
I was actually just thinking of that today.
We have a policy that's mostly drafted. I need to, Chief Bird would like me to speak with the finance and payroll department in the town of Exeter and see how they've rolled out how they handle their earn time. So I have an email out to that department waiting for them to get back to me.
Okay. Well, we're signing that. I will take a motion to approve the updated language in the select board handbook based on the vote that we did last week.
Move.
Was that somewhere passed around? I mean, I just want to make sure. I'm assuming it is what we said,
Yeah,
but
so it just changes the paragraph to say, in making these decisions, the board should always discuss individual qualifications in a public session, but the board may go into non-public session as permitted by RSA 91A, except for positions that are subject to future elections, and then it removes the word ideology. So it looks appropriate. You can check it if you'd like before you.
I trust you.
So
I hadn't seen it yet,
Yep.
that's all.
I heard a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Does Three Ponds plan another phase of development, or
They
is
do
this
not.
the end?
This is the end
The
of what
end.
is approved before the planning board at this time.
Okay, so there's nothing left.
I think if they were going to extend, I think it would be in Epping. I think it's.
Oh, it goes across the town line?
Are we circling back to committee stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
We're just waiting for Karen to finish up all her stuff.
I am done with my public session.
You are done.
My bad.
It looks like we do have one
The tax one,
non-public.
I
Yes.
think,
It
they
takes,
go this way.
it takes a long time.
Many years to get.
That one's done? Okay, that one's done.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's 11 places to sign.
Hey, did you sign it? No, I did not. I don't sign this. I disagree with the principal.
Who has the, Ribbing Brentwood application for DOT? Anyone?
In the mail.
No, but- I just want to be able to refer to it when I give my update.
Thank you.
Is there any non-public?
There's one, yeah, legal.
What are you watching?
There was 5, but 14 people reviewed different sections of our, or could be people that want to get.
Is that the normal volume of people?
But it's 2 Kennedy.
Live.
More people watching after. I just want to point out that a 1 agenda item meeting is.
I know.
like a 7 or
I
3.
know.
And he wasn't even long.
It was
That
Karen.
was Bill, it was me.
It was Karen's. It was Representative Yokela. I'm pretty sure that was his bill. Yeah.
When we do a further information on the agenda item.
Yeah. Sure, I think that makes sense.
The HB stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the, people may have strong feelings about it or not. How often do we get a request to view a sealed minutes? Almost never. Yeah.
Almost never.
All set?
I think so.
Okay, so we will move on to regular business with committee updates, and we will start with Andy.
I spoke to Bob Stevens today. The appointment of Becky Dunham during the meeting was for a permanent position, so I don't know if we can, I'll make a motion that we do that, and then Karen can work on the appointment paperwork.
So that vote did occur at
It did
last
occur,
time,
yeah.
okay.
Second.
Do we probably don't actually need to vote on it now, right? We can vote to approve it once the slip
Mhm.
comes in front of us.
And you'll have that you'll have that next week before their meeting. Before the next conservation meeting.
And then will we immediately post an opening for an alternate?
I still need to connect with Bob Stevens so that he can draft an ad for the post.
Okay.
Come on.
And Bob Stevens and
Do a granola bar.
Rob? No.
Yeah.
Jeremy Luigi.
Oh.
Jeremy Luigi. We're meeting next Tuesday afternoon to get an update on the Fuller process.
And Concom is going to discuss who will serve as chair at the next meeting?
Yes. That's all I have.
John?
Economic Development Committee tomorrow morning, 7:30 at the Rec. We'll be hosting gubernatorial candidate, former New Hampshire State Senate President, Chuck Morse, at the quarterly business breakfast. He's a business owner and has a lot of relevant experience in terms of what is important for a business environment, both at the state and municipal level. So looking forward to hearing from him at 7:30 at the Rec.
And Brentwood property
And-
owner.
What's that?
And Brentwood property.
And a Brentwood property owner, that's true. So hope as many folks can join us there as possible.
Commercial property owner?
Yes.
Commercial property on 125. Second,
Open to anyone. Anyone who wants to come
open to anyone.
can come and enjoy some coffee and
Yeah.
discussion. Maybe brisket.
Yes, maybe.
Maybe. Second thing, I cannot not highlight and praise Stephanie Beaver-Kizza, who's on the Economic Development Committee, also the Vice Chair of Brentwood's Planning Board, for taking the initiative to put together a very thoughtful, very well done proposal to the U.S. Department of Transportation for a planning grant in the amount of $300,000 that we'll be requesting to do a couple of things. So, be looking at doing existing and future conditions traffic analysis along the 125 corridor, alternatives analysis, and a public engagement program. So the estimated cost is $300,000. There is a 20% match, which can be in-kind contributions. So that is a total. If we were to be successful, the town of Brentwood would be responsible to put up 20%, $60,000, and that again can be in-kind contributions. So if we are to be successful, we don't want that to be a surprise to anyone. That will have to go to the voters in March and at town meeting. But very exciting that we're putting together such a thorough, thoughtful proposal to the federal government to support our efforts that we know we have to do on 125 to make it safer for the town and also more attractive for economic development perspective, from the economic development perspective as well. The request that we have, and I can have, any of you can review as thoroughly as you'd like the proposal that is pretty much complete, save for any small edits that will occur. But we put together a letter of support from the Board of Selectmen, from the Chair of the Board of Selectmen. So as Economic Development Committee, we're requesting hopefully unanimous support to have Jen endorse this letter that's addressed to Secretary Pete Buttigieg, just to demonstrate a unified front in our as we're looking to get this proposal accepted. So that's what I'm seeking your support to have a motion to put it to Jen for her signature. But you can feel free to read it. It's just a simple statement of support for the.
Can I ask, what would the outcome measures be of the planning grant? Like, what would the actionable items be that came out of it for the town to then act upon? Do you get a sense
We
of
would
that?
have, the ultimate goal is to have the project to produce a concept that will provide a safe option to cross 125 for pedestrians, cyclists, vulnerable users, provide a safe way to connect the rec to the other town, so library, town hall, and Swayze School. So basically, we've had professional Department of Transportation engineer describe 125 as a cleaver through our community, which I think is a relatively apt descriptor, whether you're looking at it from the bisection of the town, making Brentwood kind of a pass-through, not as opposed to a destination, but also the safety aspect in terms of, we all know what's happening at South of 125, and there's a lot of preparatory work that needs to go into actually making that safer. So either we foot the bill ourselves to do what we know needs to be done, or in this case, we try to get, you know, a 80% federal grant to cover the majority of those planning costs to achieve some of those, to achieve a plan for those things.
My only issue is 125 is a state road.
So we've actually engaged with the State Department of Transportation on this. They're aware of this grant, and we're requesting the same letter of support from them. So we're working with the Rockingham Planning Commission. That's Tim Roach, right?
Yes.
Rockingham Planning Commission, working with, we've engaged a little bit with the state. They're aware of this application, and we're requesting letters of support from RPC, the town, and the state as well.
I was more talking $60,000.
That's where I think that the in-kind contributions is going, the in-kind contribution, should we be successful, the $60,000 will be beneficial. But the other issue is, do we really want the state doing what's best for the state, or do we want to have Brentwood be in control of what's best for Brentwood? So keep in mind, the idea is that the project would produce a concept that would provide safe option to cross 125, right? So we're connecting Brentwood to Brentwood.
But I don't think we can make any alterations to 125.
I think that's part of why we need to have a concept, not necessarily alterations, but that's why we need to have a concept to propose to the to the New Hampshire Department of Transportation. Because if we don't do that, then we're literally just letting them continue to allow 125 to be a cleaver through the community. We're not actually doing anything to make it safer to cross 125 for pedestrians, cyclists, vulnerable users. So I think the idea is to have that connection.
I like the idea. The point is we can't force the state to do it, so we could spend $60,000, present them with this gorgeous engineered plan, and they can throw it in the filing cabinet and say, yes, that's in the 20-year plan.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility, but again, just to reemphasize, could be in kind, so we're not necessarily talking about a cash $60,000 contribution here.
What do you mean in kind, John? Can you explain that?
If you have an engineer provide $60,000 worth of work and that's demonstrable, then you could have that be an in-kind contribution to the $300,000.
So like if you have volunteers in town who volunteer their time.
If you have, say, a
et cetera.
$7,500 charrette that produces you a $100,000 plan, you can demonstrate a value there. I'm obviously being a little,
Right,
I'm exaggerating slightly here, but that's the point. I am making a serious point in making,
I just didn't know what that meant. So.
yeah. I think what I would like to see, John, if you're not opposed to it, is this going on a future agenda? Because I think the town was kind of waiting to hear, like after the New Hampshire plan came out, sort of what came next. And one of the things I had heard you say was like there was gonna be some like grant potential, and this sounds like this is that coming to fruition. Is there a time
it's
frame?
due on the 27th,
The 27th of October.
September. That's tomorrow.
Oh, it's due tomorrow.
So that is why I cannot stop singing the praises of Stephanie, because
Because it was a tight time frame.
this is an exceptionally tight time frame. And again, it's just a plan, right? So like,
Right,
the idea that the state is going to ever be interested in helping us to connect our community, I think is a pipe dream. That's not what the state is gonna be interested in doing. If we wanna connect our community together, we're gonna have to do that ourselves. I'm sorry for cutting off, but I'm gonna lose the thought. There is additional money. There's $175 million in this, and we're asking for 300 grand for the planning portion of it. So there is additional money out there that we can and will, should we be successful, seek. But this is the first, we need to have a plan that would allow us to seek the actual implementation funds. And unfortunately, it is a very short timeline. I'm sorry.
So, what we're asking, as simple as we can, as much as we can filter this down, is that we vote on and potentially approve the idea that our chair, Jen, signs this letter to the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and if we're successful, we could then have access to
$300,000 grant,
okay,
and we would have to take it on a warrant to the voters.
okay, that's where I wanted to get. So,
This would be, so basically what you're clarifying is tonight's decision is a non-binding decision for the community.
100% non-binding.
Yeah.
It's inside the application, it specifically lays out that our ability to execute, to even accept this money is dependent upon the warrant article that you're.
So I think that's just important to have on the record, repeated. And do we need a motion? I'm happy to make a motion to approve. But I would just say that, like others, I just feel strongly about something, that we do something in the future to try and tie it together, because it would be a little bit different if Brentwood had a downtown, or if Brentwood had a commons, like the Kingston,
The Plains.
what they call it, Plains, right? Something like that, but where we don't have that, and when my kids were a little younger, I took them to the rec fields one weekend and crossed 125. That was the one and only time I ever did that, because I still have nightmares about that. It's terrifying, frankly, and really not advisable. I just think it's anything we can do to keep moving that forward. I appreciate all the effort that you and others have put into charrette and economic development stuff. All that ties together. So with that, I am definitely in support of this moving forward. So.
Can I ask a follow-up question kind of related to Andy's question, like the jurisdictional question? So part of the Plan NH group were DOT folks, right? So there was a.
Yes, there was a DOT, New Hampshire DOT engineer there.
Right, so I haven't yet read, I saw the like preliminary report that came out, but I haven't read the final one. When I spoke to the DOT rep, when I was at the charrette, he was extremely positive about that we might someday get a roundabout at Crawley Falls. So, I guess I'm a
At the
little.
north end of Crawley Falls, you're talking.
Right, to kind of slow down traffic and allow some sort of connection and sort of, I think at that time the discussion was to reroute how you would get into the rec, right? So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, if Plan NH gave us a plan to have a roundabout at that location, and DOT was already involved in that, what would this 300,000 get us that's different than that, or better than that, or helps that actually happen? That's what I'm trying to understand, because we already have that, right? On
What we
paper.
have is a very rough
Right. Idea,
concept
yeah,
of a roundabout
right,
at that location
right,
for entry and
Right.
egress into the rec. But that program was really focused on the rec.
right,
This is an actual hardcore study of 125
okay,
itself, and very specifically tying the town together. So the entire purpose of this grant is how are we bridging communities? So this grant is titled Bridging Brentwood,
right,
right? So the charrette focused on on the rec.
Right,
DOT is gonna focus on 125.
right,
This is focusing on tying it, how do we responsibly have a plan that we can actually put forward to engineers, to developers, to actually tie it all together. So it's not, yes, it's going to study 125, historical trends and future projections and all that, but it's also going to talk about what are the different concepts. This is John Morgan.
sidewalks or rerouting.
John Morgan concept, right? Like,
Yeah,
do we have a sky bridge to connect to sidewalks, to the library, to town hall, to Swayze, so that we can have safe, reliable crossing of 125 connecting our community. So the plan would be, hey, here are a couple of concepts of how to tie your community together over this cleaver that is going through your community. And then the next step, the next phase would be putting another grant together to actually do the development of tying our community together, the actual infrastructure. So we can't tie the community together without an actual engineered, designed plan, and that's what this is.
and how would that interface with DOT, who, to my understanding, are the only people who could decide to do something different on 125 itself?
To 125 itself.
Yeah,
But that's not necessarily, we're not talking about to 125. We're talking about how do we connect ourselves
more broadly.
around, over 125, like how do we connect from one side of 125 to the other? This is not about putting a stoplight on 125. This is not about putting sidewalks on 125. This is not about 125. This is about understanding the dynamics of how 125 cuts through our community, and how can we overcome some of that to reconnect our community in a more responsible way that can help to build a more dynamic atmosphere for both residents, but also the economic development aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it's just a little confusing because I think I understand what you're saying, but then the whole cleaver idea is like, there's this cleaver, but we don't have control over what happens to the cleaver. And so, right, it's not our cleaver,
but we
it's the
do have-
state's cleaver.
But we do have,
We have to stop calling it a cleaver.
I
We've really pushed that. one too
kinda
far.
like it,
Jason has control.
I know, right? It's Halloween's kind of,
can we find a way to get a safe crossing
right,
over, under, like, is there a way, like, there are,
Can I just add too, like, I totally, points definitely, 100%, I get it. And who knows what happens further on in the process if we're successful, but I have to believe, as we've all traveled throughout New Hampshire, New England, and far beyond, some of us have seen examples of this. We probably didn't even notice it
yeah,
as we drove through communities that had ways of getting over, under, whatever, thoroughfares that were dangerous for their community. And you need to get creative, and you need a lot of brain power behind coming up with good ideas, and who knows, in the end, it may not be feasible, but I sure hope it is, because it would be really.
could we have sidewalks? Could we have sidewalks from South Road to Swayze? You know, is that feasible, is that doable to the library? Like, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
So I think it's something that, like so many things, it can be done if enough people get together, state, local, and even in this case, federal. You can make things happen, it happens all the time, so,
But we got a plan.
yeah, we could have a plan on that, so.
yeah, and I'm assuming that if, I mean, I'm not opposed to, sending a non-binding letter in support of a potential grant. I think if we do get the grant, it's gonna generate a lot more community discussion about what this really means and what the outcomes would be, which I think will be healthy. Because I know a lot of people will have a lot of questions about how this will move us forward. But it sounds like there's no risk to us at this point for if the deadline is tomorrow and you've squeezed it out really quickly. It doesn't sound like there's any downside to us because the potential outcome if we got the grant and the voters were not in favor of it is we would just relinquish the grant, I'm assuming. Right?
$250,000.
Right. But, not ideal, but, no punishment for, to us for doing that. Anyone in favor of making?
Thank you for
a
making the motion.
Russ
Yes,
made a
motion.
motion for the letter. Any second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and I'm an aye, so we will go ahead and push that forward.
Beautiful, thank you for your support.
Do you want me to sign that now, because you presumably need it, like,
Yeah, can you print out an extra copy of that? I've
Did
You got
read
some
it?
seltzer on it?
the back page applies.
pretty nice.
Well, that was a committee update.
Yeah, jeez, John.
Well, to be fair, it was really all of you.
Probably should have been an agenda item.
Yeah, it probably should have been.
Literally, this was a last second, like, should we try this? Okay, we're gonna try it.
So, once again, Stephanie,
Rock star.
great work.
All right, anything else that you have for us?
You really want me to answer?
Okay, moving on. Russ?
Good news, I don't have an update.
Okay. Paul, anything you've got for us?
Wow, have to go after that?
Yes, yeah, unfortunately you do.
I could talk about we could go from like the global to the LePages, and I hope I'm getting their name correctly. The folks who
LaRoche.
came here last time?
LaRoche.
LaRoche?
LaRoche.
Ah, okay.
Oh, the noise
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I
You
got the
have a date
"la"
for us?
correctly.
Yep,
Deborah, right?
yes,
Yes. And I think Andrew.
and Andrew, yep.
Yes, yeah. So they did also come to the planning board. At the planning board, we learned that Kip had drafted the letter that indicated that they're not in compliance. There's a date set for them to appear at the next,
Just real quick, the them is who again?
the
Andy and
applicant.
Deb LaRoche, they were the ones that were here last week.
No,
Right,
no,
but
no,
the landowner
The landowner.
is,
Who
Sorry, I
is
just wanted to
renting
clarify.
to-
yeah, I can't,
I think it was 46,125.
Well,
It was
yeah.
62.
62 route, yeah, but I don't remember who the landowner is.
Okay, sorry.
It
Yeah.
is, so the LaRoches filed their original complaint with Jillian about 6 weeks ago at that time. He had done some preliminary research to determine that the way that the property was being used was not in compliance with their approved site plan. However, the property owner, which is Grenice, had submitted an amendment to their site plan to the planning board. And because the amendment was filed, Kip closed the complaint. Glenn then reviewed the application and he deemed it incomplete, and then the owner was contacted to instruct him on how to complete his site plan review application. And then to move things along following their attendance at the select board meeting last week, Kip sent out a letter of violation and gave them, the property owner, until 10/11 to file their amendment to the site plan to be on the 11/2 planning board agenda. And then it sounds like they attended the planning board meeting just to make sure that that was moving forward.
The point being, though, that they're, at this point, clearly in violation of their site plan. So if they're going to bring forward an amendment, we'll have to, deal with that at the planning board. But it does certainly, without prejudging anything, it does give cause for concern that there is an existing violation. So having said all that, I think, at least the LePages seem to understand the process and seem at least satisfied that we have a process in place moving forward.
And the outcome measures would be if the planning board chooses not to accept the amendment and they continue to be in violation, this board would have to decide whether or not to take legal action.
At the planning board, we also addressed the large warehouse that is part of the application, the site review application where the castles are. And there are several variances that are needed relating to parking spaces and height and distance to the wetlands. And so we ended up issuing a denial for the purposes of the matter going before the zoning board to see if the variances would be granted or not. I understand that is being scheduled for sometime next month.
You know the numbers off the top of your head, how large of a warehouse they're talking?
Really large, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head though, but a really large warehouse. I think one of the largest, it would be one of the largest, or if not the largest building in Brentwood, right? So. But I could get you the numbers. Yeah, really large.
It's a big lot there.
Yeah, but we have some big buildings
Yeah,
between the courthouse and the nursing home
Yeah.
and the jail.
sure. Yeah, Island Hardwood, so we've got some big buildings.
And then we had capital improvement subcommittee last night. We heard from Wayne with regard to some trucks that may need replacing. So that will be on the plan. There are, we heard from Janice with regard to the library with regard to some painting and an elevator for access, so that will be on the plan. We heard from Dexter from the Historical Society with regard to septic and bathroom in the town building over there, and also paving the parking lot, so that will be on the plan. And we heard from someone else.
Andy?
Andy Gray.
Oh, yes, right, thank you. Yeah, we heard from Andy as well, and there were a number of asks that pertain to the charrette, but then there were more things that were specific with regard to maintenance items like building, a roof on the building, windows that aren't working at the building, and I think maybe a furnace.
Yeah, from Stacy.
Yeah. So there'll be several items there as well. So I mean, the sum and substances, Glenn is putting this together. We hope to get it at the next planning board meeting for approval. It's sort of dependent on Glenn doing the final revisions on this. If not, then it will end up being at the planning board meeting after that in mid-October. But this should be fairly comprehensive. It'll be transparent. There's going to be a lot on there, and it's going to be a lot to digest and discuss.
And that's the idea, right? It's supposed to be a 6-year plan, so it's supposed to have a lot on it that's not necessarily immediately going to be funded.
This is true.
Karen, have you thought about how this board should best use that document? Should we do our standard budget process, then review the CIP and talk about it in terms of what we might want to do for warrants versus ARPA? Have you kind of started to think about how we want to handle that document in a transparent way on this board?
I think that makes the most sense. I mean, the department heads will prioritize their projects based off of those 6 years. Glenn will format that, and we sort of try to spread out the costs. And then I think it would be up to you guys to decide whether or not you want to maintain that prioritization or move things around based off of what else you foresee in the warrants.
There's a lot on there.
There's
There will be a lot on there,
Of
so
course
we'll
there
have a
is.
lot, yeah. And I would be amiss if I didn't also mention Andy, in the rec department talking about as a priority the bathrooms at the, at the rec, and wanting to put real bathrooms. I think he was talking about up to 6 stalls potentially, so.
Okay, good. I think that'll be a good discussion. We had said for transparency and planning, and because we do have a little bit of ARPA money, that we really wanted to discuss that CIP in a very overt fashion. So maybe after we get through kind of standard budget, we can turn our attention to that.
I do have one more action item before we go into non-public, that's right.
Janice had a question, and then Karen, have we put stuff on the CIP plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
We put,
Software.
software updates, which is funded out of a capital reserve fund. The server updates are in there as part
Yeah.
of the,
Furnace.
and then we put the furnaces on there. But those will all of the items I put on there would be funded through annual capital reserve funding, not through anything
Additional
beyond
funds.
that.
Well, and again, I know we'll get into detail on this at some point, but, and I know that was sort of what we were struggling with in the subcommittee was, so, there's a lot on there in terms of maintenance and what is available through capital reserve, funding or maintenance, line items. And so I think ultimately, the folks on the budget committee and ourselves are gonna need help, with that in terms of that information, so we can kind of make some longer term decisions about
Well,
things.
Some of it's fluid too. I mean, we have $100,000 in the capital reserve fund for building maintenance, but I mean, you're not gonna replace furnaces here, air condensers, if we plan to sell the building in the next couple of years.
Right.
And relocate, right? So those funds would be reallocated to different buildings or different projects.
But I think to your point, the CIP will have some things on it that will need complete fundraising through taxation or ARPA, and some things that already have some coverage of their costs.
True.
You have to take that into consideration.
And
I see what you're
I think they net it out at the bottom. I think there's rows at the bottom that
Yep.
Glenn
Takes that
identified
into
those
account.
Yep.
for funding sources.
Janice, did you have a?
Well, that's kind of what I was gonna get to, is one of the questions we had, that they were able to answer is our entryways, both front and back, have to be replaced. They're both, actually hazardous at this point. And so where that money would come from, is that something we put on a warrant, or does that come from building maintenance? So that doesn't have to be answered now, but I was.
And I think, those things going on the CIP, that's why you put them there, to then discuss
Right.
where the funds come from for all the prioritization, right? So it's okay if you don't know in advance. If you know you need it, that's why it goes on the CIP.
We'll know well in advance in order to, if we have to put in a warrant this year, we'll know.
I think that's kind of the point of having the big CIP discussion is what things need to go on the warrant next year versus the year after, versus the year after, versus the year after, versus what might be able to do with some ARPA, et cetera. So it's just a
But that's a,
master planning discussion,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So we
but
have
that's
to
a
have
big,
that discussion.
concern, obviously with regard to access, so thank you for raising
Right,
it.
so we have to have that discussion before, February when we put warrants together. Yep,
Just trying to plan in my head what I need to do next.
Yep. okay. Anything else, Paul?
That's it.
Good, Karen, you had one more thing?
I have one more thing. So the Mill Road Bridge was deemed substantially complete by Stevens Associates last fall. The last thing that we were waiting for was for grass to regrow on both sides of the bridge. That still hasn't happened. Stevens Associate has been working with WP Davis throughout the entire spring and summer, and still nothing fruitful has come from it. So we have $40,000 sitting in retainage, and Bob Stevens would recommend that we hold 8 of it and use that to pay the outstanding invoices that we still owe to Stevens Associates, and use some of those other remaining funds so that we can regrow the grass and have our highway department take care of that, and then release the rest of the funds back to WP Davis and close out the project.
Must have been a lot of water.
So we were waiting on them, comedian. So we were waiting on them to do something, and for whatever reason, it has not happened, and so we're kind of assuming maybe it's just not going to happen and we're taking another route.
And so, yeah, so we're gonna take the $8,000 and say, we're gonna cover our costs, we're gonna do it ourselves, and here's the rest of your money, have a nice day.
How much do we owe them to close it out?
It's 40, so we're gonna keep 8, and or the recommendation is to keep 8 and just give them back the 32. So they're forfeiting that $8,000 by not doing the work themselves.
Okay, and the 32 was extra that is not,
It was
Needed.
holdback, so for every invoice that they submit, we hold back 10%, and so we've done that throughout the duration of the
Oh.
project. So it's money that is owed to them.
we do owe it them, okay. Do you need,
I would need a
motion to
motion,
move
because that
forward
would
with
need to
that?
expend it out of the capital reserve for bridge.
So, I just want to be clear though, are we dissatisfied with how things are
I think,
ending here?
I think at this point, it has taken them too long to take the initiative to get things going. And we don't
Sounds like
wanna
they
wait
just
any
haven't
longer,
done
we wanna just do it.
So, yeah, so, and then that selection process, by the way, how does that go, how do we go about doing that, selecting a contractor?
We did that through a formal bid process.
Okay,
That was conducted through, Stevens Associates managed that bid process.
okay. Just in terms of going forward and having a memory of that was my only point in bringing up that clarification.
I think we were satisfied with the rest of the
bridge.
job,
Yeah.
it was just the remaining,
The little small detail at the end kind of got missed, it sounds like.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
No grass.
Motion?
moved. For,
I
Motion
thought you
and a
said
second.
Alicia, and I was like, I don't think.
Are you seconding?
Second.
Okay, I hear a motion and a second. All in favor?
I,
And I'm an aye, so we'll make that change there.
Thank you.
And then that'll be completely closed out with them and we'll be
Yes.
done.
Yep.
Okay. One more topic for you, Karen, before we close out. Any updates on the website or deliverable dates or anything like that?
I do not, communications met on the 14th, and I haven't had a chance to connect with Stephanie on any material updates since that date.
what was the contract date to be off the ground?
The goal was to be off the ground in October,
Okay.
so we're pushing right up against that.
That's what I thought, that's what I was asking.
Does that look like that will happen or are we gonna get delayed a bit?
I think we may potentially get delayed a bit. I think there was a little bit of miscommunication with the communications committee on what we were, I think they were trying to take all of the content that was on the current website, and my understanding was that they were gonna sort of zhuzh it up and make the voice on all of the pages sound consistent. And then as they divvied up each department's pages, depending on who was working on each page, they were adding content and redesigning things and adding, it seemed like a lot more than just
Yeah,
a refresh.
that was my.
And I think the focus is like, hey, let's get a refresh, let's get this up and going, let's let it look consistent, and
do the
then
rest of the work
do the
later?
rest later,
Oh.
and phase it in. That would be,
They probably
phase
got a
two.
little excited, I would imagine.
Yes,
Yeah, in
Okay.
these situations, and I think we even talked about how, it's just so difficult to avoid allowing perfect to be the enemy of
Right.
good, and especially with this website stuff,
Yep.
so we're doing God's work, and
it
hopefully,
looks great.
Okay, so we'll try to kind of hit that happy medium to get it up sooner rather than later if we
Yes.
can. Okay, perfect. Okay. Anyone else with any board business before we make a motion to go into non-public for legal?
Legal.
Legal. Anything else? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to go into non-public for 91A legal. Roll call,
Andy
Andy?
and John.
Aye.
John? Russ?
Aye.
Paul? And I'm an aye, so we'll go into non-public.
Let's give it a
I guess that depends how agreeable you are.
Ah.
Yeah, bye.